And I just hit rename, and you'll watch it's going to change the colors on them all, and it renames them all down there. If you work in commercial post-production, you know you've got lots of timelines, right? You've got the 30, the 15, the 6, the 10, whatever, and then all those aspect ratios, the 9:16, the 4:5, the 1:1, the 16:9, so on and so on. The point is you've got lots of timelines that are going to use redundant media, but a lot of times that redundant media might have different frame ranges, maybe from a trim, maybe from a speed change. Go up to View, Show Duplicate Frames, and this color indicator above just says, hey, you're using this shot multiple times in the timeline. So for instance, this waterfall shot is green here. It's used completely the same here in the 15 and the 6. But if I go to the 30, there's the waterfall shot, but it's completely different frames. It's a different range. Maybe a different editor worked on it. And so what happens a lot of times is a colorist will go render out every single timeline into its own folder, and we have lots of rendered files with different frame ranges, and it becomes a mess really fast. So today, we're going to learn how to make a sources sequence that we're going to build before sending it to color, before sending it to VFX. And this is going to make sure we have one copy of each clip that's used amongst all of our timelines, including the frame handles that we need. Let me show you how it's done. Step 1 is going to be to generate dummy metadata media. The way it works is you just select your timelines in your bin, and then you go down to File, Media Management. We'll use it in a way you've probably never done before. We're just going to create temp files with it. So it's got your timelines pre-selected. We're going to use transcode, use media, and trim. This is where you define your handles. So if you need 48 frames, this is where you would do it. If you need 10, you'd set it to 10. I'm cheap. I'm just going to do it for 4 for this tutorial today. But the idea is this is where you define them. Under the video tab, we're going to choose the format DPX. So we want an image sequence. And the reason we want an image sequence, a file sequence, is because if you have a QuickTime container, it will just overwrite whatever the next version it's trying to render out with media management, and we might lose frames. So this ensures that we're going to get all the right frames tacked on into our consolidated temporary media storage bin. So DPX is good. Resolution, I set this to 320 by 180 because, again, really tiny. This is only for metadata, so we can conform back to the RAWs, knowing the exact frame range that we need. So I'll click Start. Put it in temp folder, sure, on the desktop. It's a tutorial, why not? And once that's done, we're going to reload and conform. Step 2, conform the dummy metadata media back to the RAWs. And so the way this will work, just create a finished bin. I have a temp bin over here. I'm going to just drag the footage. And by the way, after you've run media management, if you've never seen this before, sometimes you get this S000. That indicates that you've used the same original source clip twice, and it just wanted to make sure that it didn't overwrite this folder. Don't worry, this whole workflow, we're going to generate unique names for everything and include the original file metadata. It's pretty bomber. So let me just show you. I'm going to select all these clips here, not the DRTs. I don't care about the audio files or the stills. Those will just stay as is for Conform. I'm just dragging the footage, the DPX sequences, right into a bin over here, and then we'll lay these out on a timeline. Now, this is a point where you could come through here and you can organize and sort this so that when we go to publish these, that the order does matter. Generally, I just leave them in not the order that they're in the timelines, but just the order that is like an alphanumeric order or something like that. We can create a timeline with these easily just by right-clicking the temp bin and saying new timeline using select a bin, and we'll just call this one publish. And this is little, not super high quality DPX files. See how they're all, if you go to the inspector file tab, they're 320 by 180. The point of this is the correct frame ranges that we need for that 4 frame handles that we defined, so that when we go to relink these and publish out our shots, we have every frame we needed and we don't have any redundant media from here on out. So to conform these in DaVinci Resolve, if you've never done it before, you just select all your clips. The way I do it, at least, I Option Shift drag up. That makes a copy and restrains it from going left to right. Then I right click on there, and then I disable the Conform Lock Enabled button right there. That allows me to automatically reconform these to RAWs that are already in the project. So once that's done, there's actually one more step I love to do, and that's to change the clip color of these so that I can see if they've actually changed. So that's easy to do with them already selected. Maybe I just change these to this green color here. And then you'll notice in the project, I've already preloaded these raw clips. So this is what we're going to conform back to. And the way you conform on like a whole timeline at once is I like to have what I want to conform selected. I right click on the word or the timeline that I want to conform. So in the bin, they go to timelines, reconform from bins is the command. And then what are we going to conform? Attempt to reconform the selected clips. That's the ones selected in orange. And then you tell it where are the clips you want to conform to. Well, they're going to be inside my footage folder. So that was inside here. Just, your organization, your project matters here. I'm only going to conform based on time code, right? Just using time code. Now, you could use real name if you had clips like from an area that had, embedded real name information. But for this workflow, I'm assuming maybe you have Sony footage or even Blackmagic RAW or consumer footage. It doesn't have embedded real name, so you're just going to have to stick with time code. Click OK, and all of those, you saw that the color changed. That means they actually changed the new clip, and you can see that in the inspector. These are all Blackmagic RAW. The next step is we need to actually check, did these shots actually end up being the correct ones? So that's why I have two layers here. One, the top layer is our new layer, right? So that's the Blackmagic RAW. The layer underneath was the DPX, the temp files. I need to check to make sure it actually got the correct frames. A couple ways I like to do that. One is in the viewer, in the timeline viewer, the 3-dot options menu, I turn on show timecode overlays. And this shows me the video 1 and video 2 time codes at the same time when I'm hovered over. So that's helpful. The other thing that's really useful is to select all the clips above, go to the video composite mode and change that to difference. And essentially here, if it's black, that means they match up. They're the same. Now, obviously there's compression that we're seeing through here, but if there's not much flicker as you go through here and check, that means the shots are the same. It's a really quick way you can sort of scan through and check, because inevitably, if it's a multi-day shoot or a multicam shoot, you might have some issues. So check this out. This one does not match. It clearly does not match. So I'm going to change this to normal. I'll hit D for disable the clip. Totally wrong shot, right? That's going to happen every once in a while. The way you fix this inside of DaVinci Resolve really easily is we have this clip conflict badge. In fact, this little badge is supposedly how Resolve got its name, to resolve these clip conflicts. And the way it works is you just double click that red icon there, and it shows you all the other matching timecode options that are available with clips that are inside your project. So it says, hey, maybe it's this one here you want it instead. And in fact, yes, that is the one I want. I want that one that has that canoe out on the lake. So I'll just choose that instead, the B-RAW version. It tells you the file extension, which is helpful. So I'll click change, and now if I go back over here to difference mode, now they match. The other thing that would be really useful to do, actually, let's leave this back on difference because there's another one to check here. And this one I noticed, this one also had overlapping timecode, but the shot's the wrong one. So same idea here. Just double click that, choose the Blackmagic RAW one. Now we can come through, Shift Z, just make sure they're all correct. Once they're correct, we're done with the raw conform. I'm going to change the composite mode back to normal. I'll just smash these down holding shift to video track 1. I can come back here to my temp bin, delete the DPX. In fact, at this point, if you wanted to, you can just go back to your file, your disk storage and trash those there as well. We don't need those anymore. That media manager was only to figure out what the best length version of each of these shots is so that we can generate new media from the deliver page. Set up metadata. How do I make sure that I get unique file names rendered out so that I don't get these crazy folders that say like v1 dash blah blah blah, or have to use the unique file names checkbox on the deliver page? We're not going to touch that at all. We're creating the unique names ourselves for the entire post-production process. Under the edit page, we're going to uniquely identify them in two ways. One is using metadata tokens, and the other one is using a custom script that you can get for free. It's on my website. You can just download it, as well as GitHub. Pavel, he's the one who originally created it. Amazing guy. You can get it from his GitHub as well. What it's doing is it's going to rename clips that are on the timeline using the inspector name field right here, and it leaves the clips alone back in the bin. So the first thing we'll take a look at for the metadata renaming is assigning layers for comps. So back in the original timelines, I'm looking for any composites that require multiple layers of footage to create a single shot. So this one here is a sky replacement I put in there, so you can see how the layer naming works. So I'm going to need a sky, and I'm also going to need this driving shot. So back in my publish sequence, I need to locate those and stack those up. This is a manual process. I'm just going to hold C so I can sort of hover scrub around. There's my sky. I'll lift that up, option up arrow. Where's my driving shot? Should not be too hard to figure out. No, this is a commercial. It's right there at the beginning. So I'll just drag this so it's sort of, it's ready to go. They're layered up on top of each other. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to be able to export those into the same folder. So if one artist needs to hit one folder, they have all the media they need for that shot already in that folder. Next step, I'm just going to delete this gap down here. Don't really have to, but I'm going to. And the other thing I'll say is before I run my script is I don't want any overlap between shots. So I'm just creating a little gap there. So all of this right here, this is going to end up being shot 10, the first shot in the sequence. And I just don't want any overlap between the different layers. Track tokens. So the next thing I want to do is set up the video track name. So video track 1 is called video 1. If you just click on where it says video 1, you can change that to say L1, meaning that's all our layer 1 clips. The next one's going to be L2. If you had 3, 4, 5 in a more complicated composite, you just extend that up. And the deliver page naming will account for which layer it's on. So it's going to help you with that organization. All these clips need a common prefix. So they all kind of belong to the same job. Maybe it's the same timeline. I'll do that using scene metadata. So I'll select all the clips. In the inspector, the file tab over here, you've got a scene section. And I would just give this like a 3 or 4 digit code. This will be the prefix for every file that you generate. And I will just call this one CAN for canoe. And once I do that, it has locked it in for all of those selected clips. It's taking care of all of them for me. So I've got 2 bits of metadata tokens that'll be used on a deliver page preset. Now we get to actually have fun and use the automatic shot renaming script. So I'll put on the screen right now where you install it to, but essentially the way it works is you go to Workspace, Scripts, and the one I've got is called Shot Namer version 1. Pavel's one is called Timeline Clips Renamer, and they just have little bit different features is all. I'll just load Shot Namer version 1, and you'll see it's got a pattern, which is right now I have 3 hashes in there. It's great for commercials because we don't have that many shots. If you have work on films, you might want to put an extra hash in here to get an extra padding digit in there. But we start by 10, we increment by 10. The reason we do that is because if we have an inserted shot that needs to be in between, we've got 10 available slots to stick in between and keep our sorting. And I just hit rename, and you'll watch it's going to change the colors on them all, and it renames them all down there. And essentially the name it's renamed it to is the name that's in the file inspector file tab over here. The last piece of metadata, and this is really important before we go to the deliver page, is we need to enable the real name support so that we can keep that file name in the metadata of the file. And the way that's done is in the project settings. So Shift 9 opens your project settings. I'm going to go to the general options, and then it'll be conform options, assist using real names from, and I want to embed the source clip file name as the metadata. Essentially what happens is when you go to deliver and render shots out, it pays attention to this setting, and so it'll actually embed the source clip file name into the files as they're rendered. That's what we want. That's how we can keep a record of where the shot came from. This is when you want to think about debayering, if it's raw footage, how you want to debayer it. For commercials, I see there's like really 2 ways. You make either QuickTime ProRes 4x4s in log, or you make EXRs in ACES CG. But since I want to render these out as ACES CG, I will also, while I'm in my project settings over here, go to my camera raw settings. This is Blackmagic Raw, so I can just change everything all at once to ACES AP1 linear, which means ACES CG, which is going to work great across not just Resolve, but any other finishing tool that's out there in the market. We'll hit save, and you'll notice I just changed everything to a very high contrasty sort of dark look, but that's ACES CG, and we'll deliver this out of the deliver page next. Deliver page. This is when we actually go to write out these new master files. So because I've debayered to ACES CG, I'll just show you this workflow, but the same thing would apply if you were debayering to a log format and using ProRes. So on the deliver page, first thing to take a look at, I'm using a preset. I'm going to walk you through this. You can download the preset from my website. It's called ACES EXR 4-frame Media Manage. The video tab, format I'm going to choose is EXR. It's a floating point format, so it's going to retain all that dynamic range. Even though it looks clipped and blown out here, we have all that detail there, including the negative values. And the codec I like to use is RGB float which actually is not the correct one. I want to use half float. So half float DWAB, which is 16-bit. Okay, RGB half DWAB, 45 is the default compression. That's good. Render at source resolution, of course. But the thing that gets overlooked a lot is you come down to advanced settings down here. I'm going to choose disable sizing and blanking output. If for whatever reason you had edit page sizing enabled, like you had zoomed in a little bit, this makes sure it's completely removed before you go render. That's important. And then no frame handles. The point here is we've already media managed to the 4 frame handles that I want. So I'm not going to actually add any more extra handles here because that's going to mess up my frame counting on the next page. So the next page as we come across here is the file tab for the EXRs. And you notice we're going to start down low and work our way up. First thing is replace existing files in place. I don't really know if this is totally necessary, but the idea is if you needed to overwrite a frame, you could. But this one here, each clip starts at frame, and I chose 997. Where did I come up with 997? Well, the idea is we want our comps to start at frame 1001, so we're never working in negative frame numbers. And we can export new plates that had more handles later on if we needed to. And the 997 is because we had 4 frame handles. So it was 1001 minus 4 is 997. So if you needed 10 frame handles, I would set this to 991 as you're starting. And that just lets anyone know that's working on the shot that the shot actually starts at 1001 and what frame that actually is. 4 digits in the file name. And now here's where we get to metadata tokens and how that works over here in Resolve. I've got a custom name and a custom subfolder for these EXRs. I'm going to pull up a text edit window because it's a little bit easier to see how this works. In fact, if I select all these and just make them a little bit larger, it might be easier to see. The way you call up metadata tokens when you type them in is you hit the percentage sign and then you start typing the word. You don't need these curly brackets here. You can just start typing scene. In fact, here I'll just demonstrate this. So percentage sign, scene. And then if you click on there, as long as you get that little, gray token around it, you're actually using the metadata. Now that scene metadata was taken, remember on the deliver page, we selected all the clips and put that metadata in there. That's what that is. So that'll be CAN _ the clip name. Clip name is basically that timeline clip name that we had renamed using the script. So on the edit page, this would be shot 70 or SH070, which refers to the file. You come down here to name right here, SH070. So that's the unique identifier for that shot. And this one here, shot 10, actually had 2 layers to it. Speaking of layers, on the deliver page, the next thing we're taking a look at is percentage sign track name. So track name is the video track layer. So L1, L2, L3. And then it's a very good idea to incorporate the color space that it's being written to so that everyone is on the same page there. So ACES_CG _ version 000, and then I put a dot at the very end. That just helps to separate the frame sequence numbers so that you don't have the frame number butted up right against the version number, which is kind of messy. That just organizes that a little bit better. And then the file subfolder is essentially this string right here. You can copy and paste it in, but it basically is just going to auto-generate folders for us. So we've got, if we go to the very beginning of it, it's going to start with the scene. It's going to group all the shots in the same scene clip name, and then we're going to go in there and basically we'll have our track name versions inside of it there. But this is what we're using. I will just say, okay, give it a location, go to the desktop, and we'll call this published. Click OK, add to render queue, render it out, and this is actually developing all the RAWs into ACES_CG with the unique file names organized into folders that can easily be distributed to any colorist, any VFX artist, and then using sort of a master timeline to use remote grading, which we'll take a look at here next once these are all rendered out. So on my desktop, I've got a folder here called published, and you can see it's filling those up. It's pre-organizing my layer 1, my layer 2 into the same folder with those sequences. And they're starting out frame 997, so we can easily have that 4 frame handles and know, okay, where frame 1 is. And because we're working in a floating point space, we haven't lost any of that dynamic range at all. Let's wrap this up. So we've got our sources rendered out. The EXRs with the embedded real name metadata is 9 gigabytes. You can send this to anyone you want. But if you want to bring it back into Resolve and create a remote rendering timeline, which basically says we can conform to these, and every timeline is going to get all the color grades applied automatically. The way I would do that is just drag the folder into DaVinci Resolve. And the first thing is real name metadata. So remember, we rendered using the metadata from the file name. It looks like we've lost it, but we haven't. The only thing you need to do is just revert this to the embedded data. So Shift 9, project settings, general options, change this to embedding, because when we rendered, we embedded the clip name. Now we want to actually see what was embedded. So I changed this from here on out to embedding in source clip file, click save, and we can see our record of where the clips actually came from if that's necessary. Maybe we need to go back and get longer handles, not just those 4 frames. And the other thing I would say and point out that's nice is another script that cleans these files up in the bin. That one basically just strips off the extension and the frame range number. Again, this one can be found off of Pavel's GitHub site, and you just run it by selecting your bin, going to Workspace, Scripts, and it's called Remove Sequence Padding. Now when you go to render this out, we've got a much cleaner file name to work with. Generating the sources sequence is just putting these on a timeline and making sure remote grading is turned on. If you want to turn on remote grading for an entire project to start, Shift 9, the project setting, under General Options, Color, and then you'll just take a look down over here. Normally it says use local versions for new clips in timeline. That's the default since like version 9. But if you uncheck that, it'll use remote grades. So I'm going to use remote grades and just have that unchecked. I'll create a sources timeline by right-clicking the sources bin and saying create a new timeline using selected bin. We'll call it sources because, well, yeah, there's sources. I like to always uncheck this even though there's no in and outs on those. Use selected mark in and out. That could get you into trouble sometimes. Just hit create. Maybe even give these a color, so that these are your finishing files to work with. And then you want to verify that you have remote grading enabled on the color page. And you can do that by just double clicking under the thumbnail. If it says parentheses R, that means if you color grade this, it gets applied to every other timeline in your project that was using that same source media. If the timeline was already generated before the project setting, you can always right click on a thumbnail on the color page and come up to, say, use remote grades. You make sure this sources timeline has all the grades on it. You render from this timeline. You don't use unique file names when you go to the deliver page. Just put it in a color render folder, and then you've got all your shots are done. You don't have duplicates upon duplicates for every different length of timeline. The other benefit, because I do a lot of cleanup work, visual effects stuff, is if I build my comps for the Fusion page, off the sources sequence, then I know I'm using all the handles for every shot that's needed as well. Hey, my name is Chadwick. I'm a DaVinci Resolve Master Trainer based here in New York, but I'm also a working finishing artist, and that's sort of why I wanted to teach this. I know this is super niche, but if this helped you at all, please let me know. In fact, if you need any assistance, I'm available for consulting through my website. I appreciate you so much, and because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.